Marcus was 18 years old. He had $43 in a torn envelope, a garbage bag with everything he owned, and not a single person on earth who was legally required to care what happened to him next. That morning, a caseworker named Patricia had handed him a thin manila folder across a laminate desk. Inside, a copy of his birth certificate with 2 names he didn't recognize, a social security card, and a check for $43, the state's way of saying, "Good luck, you're on your own now." Patricia said, "You're technically an adult now, Marcus. The system can't hold your case any longer." She said it the way someone reads a weather report. Cloudy, slight chance of rain. Have a nice day. He walked out of that building at 9:17 in the morning and stood on the sidewalk for 4 full minutes. Not because he didn't know where to go, but because there was nowhere to go. For 3 weeks, Marcus slept on a bench at the 34th Street bus shelter. The metal was always cold, even in July, and the whole place smelled like diesel and old rain. He learned which maintenance workers looked the other way. He learned which trash cans had edible leftovers from the food cart on the corner. He learned that invisibility isn't a superpower. It's a slow kind of disappearing. He had one photograph, not in the folder Patricia gave him. This one he'd carried since he was 7, transferred from group home to group home, like it was the only thing worth keeping. A Polaroid, a man and a woman standing in front of something large and brick. You couldn't see what it was. The photo was cut at the edges, like someone had deliberately removed the context. He looked at it sometimes, not for comfort, more like a question he couldn't stop asking. On a Tuesday, 3 weeks and 2 days after aging out, Marcus was walking down Alderman Street when he saw it. Through a chain-link fence, half swallowed by overgrown weeds and 20 years of neglect, a building. 2 wide bay doors sealed shut with rust, a faded number above the entrance, Station 9, a city fire station that the city had clearly forgotten. He almost kept walking. But taped to the gate, sun-bleached, barely readable, was a small official notice. Tax delinquency auction, city property, minimum opening bid, $10. He stopped. He read it 3 times. He had $43. He tore the notice off the gate, folded it once, and put it in his pocket. He didn't know why. He couldn't have explained it to anyone. It wasn't logic. It wasn't strategy. That night, for the first time in years, sitting on that cold metal bench with diesel in the air and a torn envelope in his hand, Marcus asked for something. He didn't know who he was asking. He just asked. He had no idea that someone had been waiting for exactly 18 years for him to walk through that door. The auction was held on a Thursday morning in a municipal parking lot 3 blocks from City Hall. 11 people showed up. Marcus was the youngest by at least 30 years. He stood at the back in a grey hoodie with a fraying sleeve, holding the notice he'd torn off the gate like it was a ticket to somewhere. Everyone else had clipboards, coffee cups. One man had a briefcase. The auctioneer, a tired-looking city official with a laminated badge, read the property description in a flat, bureaucratic voice. Station 9, 1140 Alderman Street, decommissioned 2004, structural status, unverified, sold as is, no warranties expressed or implied, minimum opening bid, $10. Nobody moved. The auctioneer looked up from his clipboard, looked around, looked back down. Do we have $10? Silence. Marcus raised his hand. The 11 people in that parking lot all turned to look at him at the same time. One man actually lowered his coffee cup slowly, the way people do when something unexpected happens and they need both hands free to process it. The auctioneer blinked. $10. Do we have 15? Silence. Going once, going twice. The man with the briefcase made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff, something in between. Sold, to the young man in the back. Marcus walked to the front of that parking lot and counted out 10 single-dollar bills onto the folding table. The auctioneer handed him a carbon copy receipt and a single key on a rusted ring. He walked back to Alderman Street alone, The key worked on the second try. Inside, Station 9 smelled like 3 different decades all at once: motor oil, old wood, and something underneath both of those that Marcus couldn't name. Dust moved in the light coming through the cracked bay windows. 2 rusted metal lockers stood against the far wall, doors hanging open, empty. An old calendar still pinned above them, March 1987. The fire engine was long gone, but the outline of where it had sat, slightly cleaner concrete, protected from years of grime, was still visible on the floor like a ghost. Marcus walked the perimeter slowly. Concrete floor, exposed ceiling beams, a small office in the back corner with a broken chair and a filing cabinet with no drawers. And then, the wall. On the north side of the building, tucked behind where the lockers stood, was a section of cinder block that didn't match. The rest of the station was original brick, old, darkened, settled into itself over a century. But this section was newer, lighter, laid with more care than the rest of the building, like someone had taken their time. It was approximately 6 feet wide, floor to ceiling. Marcus put his hand flat against it. It sounded different when he knocked. Hollow. He didn't have tools. He had $33 left and a garbage bag of clothes. He sat on the concrete floor and looked at that wall for a long time. Then he heard boots on gravel outside. An older man appeared in the open bay door. City maintenance jacket, grey beard, eyes that had seen 100 buildings like this one. He looked at Marcus, looked at the wall, looked back at Marcus. Without saying a single word, he unclipped a crowbar from his belt and held it out. Marcus took it. "Whatever's back there," the man said, "has been waiting a long time." Then he walked back out into the sunlight and didn't look back. It took 40 minutes and every bit of strength Marcus had. The cinder blocks came down one by one, dust filling the air, his arms burning, his eyes watering. And when the last block fell and the dust began to settle, there was a room, small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, a wooden desk, a corkboard covered in papers and photographs, and on the desk, sitting perfectly centered, like it had been placed there deliberately, like it had been waiting, a metal lockbox, old, solid, and engraved on the lid in careful letters. TC. Marcus picked it up. It was locked. For 3 weeks, Marcus slept on a bench at the 34th Street bus shelter. The metal was always cold, even in July, and the whole place smelled like diesel and old rain. He learned which maintenance workers looked the other way. He learned which trash cans had edible leftovers from the food cart on the corner. He learned that invisibility isn't a superpower. It's a slow kind of disappearing. He had one photograph, not in the folder Patricia gave him. This one he'd carried since he was 7, transferred from group home to group home like it was the only thing worth keeping. A Polaroid, a man and a woman standing in front of something large and brick. You couldn't see what it was. The photo was cut at the edges, like someone had deliberately removed the context. He looked at it sometimes, not for comfort, more like a question he couldn't stop asking. On a Tuesday, 3 weeks and 2 days after aging out, Marcus was walking down Alderman Street when he saw it, through a chain-link fence, half swallowed by overgrown weeds and 20 years of neglect, a building. 2 wide bay doors sealed shut with rust. A faded number above the entrance, Station 9. A city fire station that the city had clearly forgotten. He almost kept walking, but taped to the gate, sun-bleached, barely readable, was a small official notice. Tax delinquency auction, city property. Minimum opening bid, $10. He stopped. He read it 3 times. He had $43. He tore the notice off the gate, folded it once, and put it in his pocket. He didn't know why. He couldn't have explained it to anyone. It wasn't logic. It wasn't strategy. That night, for the first time in years, sitting on that cold metal bench with diesel in the air and a torn envelope in his hand, Marcus asked for something. He didn't know who he was asking. He just asked. He had no idea that someone had been waiting for exactly 18 years for him to walk through that door. The auction was held on a Thursday morning in a municipal parking lot 3 blocks from City Hall. 11 people showed up. Marcus was the youngest by at least 30 years. He stood at the back in a grey hoodie with a fraying sleeve, holding the notice he'd torn off the gate like it was a ticket to somewhere. Everyone else had clipboards, coffee cups. One man had a briefcase. The auctioneer, a tired-looking city official with a laminated badge, read the property description in a flat, bureaucratic voice. Station 9, 1140 Alderman Street, decommissioned 2004, structural status unverified, sold as is, no warranties expressed or implied, minimum opening bid $10. But taped to the bottom, in handwriting so careful it looked like a prayer, was a single folded note. He opened it. 4 words. For the one who comes looking. The room smelled like cedar and old paper, not damp, not rotting. Someone had thought about preservation. A small tin of cedar blocks sat in each corner, dried out now, but still faintly working. Whoever had sealed this room hadn't done it in a panic. They had done it carefully, deliberately, like packing something away that they fully intended someone to find. Marcus set the lockbox down and looked around. The corkboard above the desk held photographs, maybe 30 of them pinned in no particular order. Black and white ones alongside colour ones. Different decades, different faces. But in almost every photograph there was something in common. Nobody was looking at the camera. They were all looking at something else. A building being repaired. A child receiving something. A table covered in food. An older woman opening an envelope and covering her mouth with both hands. These weren't portraits, they were records. The journal was underneath the desk, not hidden, just placed low, the way you'd store something important without making it obvious. Leather cover, worn soft at the corners, no name on the outside. Marcus sat down in the dust and opened it. The first entry was dated April 3rd, 1987. Paid 3 months of back rent for the Okafor family on Clement Street. Used the side account. They don't know it was us. That's the point. T. He turned the page. Covered the medical bill for a boy named Raymond. Appendix surgery, no insurance. Left the payment at the front desk in cash. Nobody asked questions. A. Page after page. Entry after entry. Years of them. Anonymous rent payments, school fees paid in full for children whose parents had written letters to no one in particular, hoping someone might read them. Groceries left on doorsteps. A furnace replaced in the middle of winter for a family the journal only referred to by street address. Every entry signed with one of 2 initials, T or A, sometimes both. Marcus read for a long time without moving. It was somewhere around 1994, he was maybe 60 pages deep, that he saw it. A name. Full, this time, not initials. Thomas Cole, and 3 entries later, Amara Cole. He read both entries twice, then a third time. The handwriting was careful, and even. The kind of handwriting that came from someone who understood that words, once written, became permanent. His hands had gone still without him noticing. He reached into the inside pocket of his hoodie, the one with the broken zipper he'd safety pinned shut, and took out the manila folder Patricia had given him. He opened it to the birth certificate. Father, Thomas Cole. Mother, Amara Cole. He sat with that for a moment, then another moment. The dust settled around him, the cedar smell, the silence of a room that had been waiting specifically for this exact second. In the back cover of the journal, almost like an afterthought, was a handwritten address. Local, 12 minutes away by bus. Below it, 1 line. Lena knows everything. She's been waiting. Marcus took the journal and walked. He found the address on a quiet residential street, a narrow house with a green door and window boxes that had been recently watered. He stood at the bottom of the front steps for a moment longer than necessary. Then he knocked. The woman who opened the door was in her 70s, small, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked at his face and something in her expression shifted. Not surprise exactly, more like the feeling of a calculation finally resolving. She looked at him the way people look at something they've been expecting for a long time. Before Marcus could say his name, before he could hold up the journal or the folder or explain a single thing, she said, "You have your mother's hands." Marcus didn't speak. Lena stepped back from the door and held it open wider. "Come inside," she said quietly. "I've been keeping something for you. Your mother made me promise to hold it until you were old enough to use it." She paused. "I was starting to wonder if you'd ever come. If you've made it this far in this story, you already know this isn't just a video. Hit subscribe. Because what happens in the next chapter is the part nobody saw coming, not even Marcus." Lena made tea. She didn't ask if he wanted any, she just made it, the way people do when they've been rehearsing a moment for years, and finally the moment has arrived and the hands need something to do. She told him everything. Thomas and Amara Cole had run their anonymous giving operation out of Station 9 for nearly 2 decades. The fire station had been Thomas's father's, a retired firefighter who'd left it to his son with one instruction: use it for something that matters. Thomas had taken that literally. The hidden room was his office. The fund, built slowly, quietly, over years of careful saving, had touched over 200 families in the city, without a single one of them ever knowing who was responsible. When Amara became pregnant, they'd made a decision. If anything happened to them before their child was old enough, Lena would hold the key. The journal would stay in the room. And the fund, converted into a formal trust, would wait. Thomas died in a car accident 6 weeks after Marcus was born. Amara, grief-stricken, alone, unable to care for a newborn, had made the hardest decision of her life. She placed Marcus into the foster system with one registered note in his file. Station 9, Alderman Street. When he's ready. A note that Patricia had never mentioned. A note that had been buried in a file for 18 years. Lena slid a key across the kitchen table. "That's for the lockbox," she said. "Your mother packed it herself." Marcus was still sitting at Lena's kitchen table, the key in his hand, the journal open in front of him, when his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. He stepped outside. A black SUV was parked directly in front of Station 9 across the street. A man in a charcoal suit was standing at the bay door, holding a document folder and speaking to someone on his phone. He was perhaps 50, silver-haired, with the kind of posture that came from decades of being the most important person in every room he entered. He saw Marcus and walked over without being invited. "Gerald Harmon," he said, extending a hand. "Harmon Property Development. I think there's been a clerical error with this sale." He was calm about it, professional, almost apologetic in tone. The way people are when they've already won, and they know it, and they want you to know it too without having to say it directly. His company, he explained, had filed acquisition paperwork on Station 9 the same week as the tax auction. His filing, he claimed, was time-stamped 4 days earlier, which would mean, legally, that the auction should never have taken place. He had a lawyer. He had documentation. He had a business card with 3 different phone numbers on it. Marcus had $23, a torn envelope, and a journal. He looked at Harmon, then at the building, then back at Harmon. "Can I have an hour?" Marcus said. Harmon checked his watch. "I'll give you 30 minutes. Marcus went back inside. He went back to the hidden room. He opened the journal to the section Lena had told him about, the final entries, the ones Thomas had written in the last months of his life, when he'd known something was coming and had tried to prepare for every possibility. And there, near the back, paper clipped to a page, was a document he hadn't noticed before. A property deed addendum, notarized, dated March 1999, transferring full legal ownership of Station 9 to the Cole Legacy Trust, with a registered trustee clause that allowed inheritance by direct biological descendant upon verified identification. Filed with the city clerk's office. Filed 5 years before Harmon's company even existed. Marcus walked back outside with the document in his hand. Harmon was leaning against his SUV, still on his phone. He looked up. He saw the paper. Something shifted in his expression, small but visible. He took the document, read it once, read it again. His jaw moved slightly, but no words came out. Then he turned to the last page and stopped. His father's name was there, in Thomas Cole's handwriting, an entry from 1991, a medical bill paid anonymously. A man named Robert Harmon. Stage 3 diagnosis, no insurance. 2 children at home. Gerald Harmon looked up from the page. He looked at the building. He looked at Marcus. His voice, when it came, was quieter than anything he'd said before. He paid for my father's treatment. It wasn't a question. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. They stood in the street outside Station 9 for a long moment. The 18-year-old with nothing, and the 50-year-old with everything. And something passed between them that neither one of them had language for. Harmon folded the document carefully and held it back out. "It's yours," he said. "It was always yours." He got in his car. He drove away. 3 days later, no phone call, no announcement, no explanation. A flatbed truck pulled up to Station 9. Gerald Harmon climbed out of the passenger seat in work clothes. The truck was loaded with lumber.